It is 6 o'clock, so I'll call this Wednesday, May 6, 2026 Board of Trustees study session to order and have the clerk call the roll.
President Brown,
Here.
trustees Donaldson,
Here.
Dykstra,
Here.
Camphor,
Here.
Mangian, Schankweiler,
Here.
Vavrick.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, we'll move on to public comment. I see several people in the audience, and I'm sure we'll have public comment. So I just want to remind you that you are limited to 5 minutes, and I'll let you know if you get to that point. Most people don't, but and then if you could just state your name for the clerk so she can have it for the meeting minutes, I'd appreciate it. So do we have any public comment? If you could stand up to the mic so everybody on YouTube can hear you.
My name is Walter Proch, and I live on 27 Lang Street. I hope this is not interfering with the special meeting that you have here. It's not on the agenda, but it's been on my mind for quite a while. And it concerns an individual that has worked for the village and done enormous amount of work that most of us don't even dare to get there. So the point I'm trying to make is that the board should be aware that we have outstanding citizens in this town. And that you should keep in mind that you somehow should reward that person while he's still alive. We have a tendency, as you well know, to recognize individuals after they pass away. My preference would be that we do it before they do that. So basically speaking, I would like to plant in your minds the idea, because I would like to nominate Bill Smith for an Outstanding Citizen Award. And I would like all of you to kind of put together ideas. I don't have to tell you all the things that he's done for the village and the things that we would not have if it had not been for him. So let's work together and come up with an idea. The state puts forward certain restrictions. I'm aware of that. But each one of you can have your individual input and do a little bit of research as to how we can go about to recognize Bill as an outstanding citizen. Thank you.
Oh, Becky.
I'm too tall, too for me. I'm Kay McCoy. We live at 18 Lang in Savoy. And I was scanning through your packet for tonight and something caught my eye and inspired me to speak. And it's about communication and objective 3B, improve communications about village operations. We have an issue. About 6 weeks ago, flags, locator flags started appearing on the west side of Lang Avenue in all of our yards. We didn't know what was going on. Called Public Works, no answer, left a message. Please call us back. Let us know what's happening. We've had no communication whatsoever. Finally, there came some digging, I don't know, 2 weeks later, maybe, of a cable. And the diggers did not speak English. So we still didn't know what was going on. So then time passed. The flags were still there. Nothing was happening. It was time to mow the yards. And we found out there is a statute of limitations on the flags. So they were pulled up. What month later, maybe, Gene? I don't know. Here came this monstrous digging equipment. In our front yard, we have a hole about like this with a great big box in it. And we assume it's Comcast, but we don't know. But the object is we have this mound of dirt. What's going to happen? Who's going to take care of that? Where's it going to go? That's our problem. Communication. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No note on the door. Nothing. And then our other issue or question refers to the Gulfview follow-up. The easement between our property and the one behind us is mud. Is that going to be seeded or is it going to be let go to weeds? It's just someone got stuck back there. He tried to take a golf cart through there and he buried it. So something needs to happen there. And we're waiting on trees. Supposedly, we're going to get replacement trees. So those are our issues. Thank you.
Becky Pittman, number 7 Lang Savoy Avenue, and I'm here to speak with regard to the Planning Commission meeting that was last week and their recommendation to the board to rezone the 2 properties from R2 to R5. I went to that meeting expecting the Planning Commission to make my case for me because everything I ever learned from planning was transitional and controlled planning. That the reason we have zoning is so we can put things where we want them. And to take property, purchase property primarily surrounded by R2, that is R2 property, primarily surrounded by R2, and zone it R5, the highest density allowed in the village, when I think I should reasonably be able to expect a transitional zoning from my side, the R2 to R5. And I saw where Bill just showed me that the future plan shows that area as being moderate density, but right now it's totally surrounded by R2 and placing R5 in the middle of it. And I have to say, I adore the cottage courts are adorable. I agree with that. I think they need to go, as the Planning Commission, I think, should have thought, where they're allowed instead of rezoning to the highest density allowed from low density property. And I hope you'll reconsider, or I know what it's like to vote against your Planning Commission, but I think if never mind, I won't say, I don't want to be critical, but, and again, I know you can't or don't have to consider the letters that were written to the Planning Commission, but I think a lot of people felt just disheartened when they came and said what they felt need to be said and were totally disregarded. So I hope you'll consider the whole issue and vote against the rezoning. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rhiannon Clifton. I live at 314 Preston Street in Prairie Meadows. I've been a resident of Savoy for quite many years now, I feel like. But I am one of the co-owners of Flippin' Fabulous, the company that is looking to rezone 2 of the 3 properties that are on the list for rezoning. Adam Sierra's here with me. He is co-owner of one of the other properties on Wesley. And my understanding is that as far as they apply to cottage courts, that R4 and R5 are essentially the same rules, and that is our intent with these properties is for cottages and sticking with all of the rules and code outlined in the UDO, and in the code, we would obviously want to follow that. So I just wanted to restate the intent. I know Marissa was here last time and she's in the air right now, so cannot be here. She's on her way home from a trip. But just did want to restate that. And I guess that's it for now. Thanks.
My name is Jan Nickham, and first of all, I need to compliment those of you that when you took roll tonight, you spoke loudly into your microphones. Some of you maybe have seen the YouTube feeds. Sometimes some of you have your mics on, sometimes some of you don't. Sometimes you talk for 5 or 10 minutes with no microphone, and those of us listening over YouTube don't hear a word that's being said. So it's nice to hear that tonight. I know Kay McCoy appreciates that, right, Kay? Okay. Main reason though, speaking of zoning, and this is a different zoning issue, but it's been spoken to in here before, but there's been no movement at all. And I live in a single family owner occupied neighborhood, and the home next to me is marked on the doors as a duplex, units A and B. Staff sitting to my right has said they're okay with it. They know about it. And those of us in the neighborhood are not okay with it. And I've been told that the CCGIS says that the owner lives there. Well, I went to the Bennett building today and they said, well, that program says that the owner lives there, but we know otherwise because we have a different program that shows what's leased. And it's been leased for multiple years now as a duplex. And that's one concern, but even a larger concern, and I've talked to Heather Mangian about it, is that they have not had trash pickup for a year, 1 year. And they filled a garage. They somehow or another had a U-Haul at their house for about a month and were possibly hauling the trash away in the U-Haul 2 places around town. And the U-Haul has disappeared. The trash has not. It's accumulated again in the garage. There's a detached yard shed that had a padlock on it until a couple weeks ago. They broke the padlock off and now they're filling that shed with garbage. And the neighbor's garage, he found them putting garbage under his garage door in his garage. So this has been going on for a year. I've called public health. I've talked to village leadership here, and I've talked to the township. Everybody says we can't do anything about it. Well, you know, fortunately the rats haven't shown up yet, or if they have, they're hiding. But it is a serious, serious concern for the people in the neighborhood because a full year with 0 trash pickup, and you'll see the little kids next door carrying 5 or 6 bags at one time to the garage. So it is a serious concern. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, one of you I know does because I was told that she knows of it, but it's number 4 Bryan Court is the address. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Last call for public comment. All right, we'll close public comment. Yes.
Jan,
What? No,
okay, he said
we don't address this,
me.
we don't address the public, so we'll move on. We'll move on to discussion items. First thing up on the agenda is the staff monthly reports. I was going to do that when we call up discussing. So Andy?
Yeah, Mr. President, the treasurer provided a comprehensive monthly financial report. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, but it's available in your packet.
Does anybody have any questions about the monthly financial report? All right. That is the end of that agenda item. So we'll move on to board discussion on the comprehensive plan goals and objectives, and we'll turn this over to Caitlin.
Sorry, I have to press all the buttons. Yeah, thank you, President Brown. Sorry. No, that one's off too. Is that better? That's still tinny, but yeah, thank you, President Brown. We have concluded the the community engagement and feedback gathering stage of the comprehensive plan. And so before we move forward into the, providing a draft plan for public review and consideration, we have draft goals and objectives that we'd like to put before the board just to get kind of a temperature check on whether we're going in the right direction. Yeah. All right. Is this better? Any better? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So as an overview, I'll be kind of introducing for anyone who's not familiar with the what a comprehensive plan is or does, what it is, the comprehensive plan timeline for the village so far, the update process, summarizing the methods and results of the community outreach, and then finally presenting a draft goal, vision, goals, and objectives for the comprehensive plan. So as some of you may know, the comprehensive plan establishes goals, policies, and actions for future development, usually over a 20-year timeline. It's the leading policy document for a municipality. All the other plans that are developed kind of have to go in lockstep with it. As we'll see tonight, it directly informs action regarding zoning and land use decisions, as well as policy implementation and municipal responses to local and regional challenges. Typically, it's updated every 10 years. For comprehensive planning in Savoy, the first comprehensive plan was adopted in 1975. The most recent update was 2019. Since that point, we've adopted a parks master plan as well as a stormwater master plan and made pretty significant progress toward things like the Curtis Road underpass and downtown Savoy. To provide an overview of the update process, I was back here in August presenting the existing conditions report and kind of launching the community outreach phase of the comp plan. We've since concluded the community outreach phase, and we're moving on, as I said, to the draft plan. This will involve, the feedback gathered tonight, distilling that into developing the draft plan document itself, providing a public comment period, doing public workshops and more community outreach to ensure that what's in the plan is reflective of the desires of the community. And then we'll move into the final planning phase with final revisions, review, and adoption anticipated by November. So the community outreach phase. We had a community survey open from August to January of this year. We received 302 community survey responses. 262 of those came from people who identified themselves as being residents of the village. That's about a 3% response rate, which is more than I've ever gotten on a survey I've sent out. So sounds small, but is kind of significant. We had 5 focus groups with local stakeholders, including local developers and business owners, realtors, and others. We had one tabling event at the rec center's 20th anniversary that was pretty well attended, and a couple of open houses that were less well attended. To provide a summary of findings from that outreach phase, for those who took the survey, you're aware that a lot of the sections involved themes from the previous comp plan, so local identity, community prosperity, and so on. We wanted to get a sense of how people felt about the village as it is now. So for local identity, we asked people to rank certain elements of the village's image and identity from strongest to weakest. Items with a higher score on this were ranked worse. So for instance, arts and cultural amenities were consistently ranked 6th out of the 6 categories. That's got an average ranking of 5.5. On the other hand, reputation was the clear winner of this question. It had an average ranking of 2.8, and aesthetics and appearance and character and appeal were also pretty highly rated. We also had written comments on the survey, which we coded based on, common themes within the survey. So identity was a big component of something that people talked a lot about in their written responses. 11 respondents stated that they felt Savoy lacks an identity or a sense of place. 3 respondents expressed that Savoy should remain a small town. And here's a sampling of what some of that feedback looked like. People said, for instance, I have an overall positive impression of Savoy's identity, but I think it's missing some opportunities to distinguish itself. Savoy feels like a place to pass through and doesn't have anything that really makes it stands out. The village does not have an identity. And then on the flip side, I love my little town. Don't start thinking we have to be big and like Champaign-Urbana. And then lastly, we started as a village, keep it that way. For community prosperity, we asked what kinds of businesses and economic activity people would like to see more of in Savoy. I think it's clear people want to see more economic activity in general, but most popular were local businesses and retail, as well as coffee shops. Commercial recreation was a close third. We also asked where people would like to see more businesses develop in Savoy, and a little over 60% each of respondents said that they'd like to see businesses develop in a centrally located downtown or in or adjacent to existing commercial developments. A little under a quarter of respondents said they would like to see more small-scale neighborhood locations as well. For written responses, 10 respondents mentioned the need for more third spaces or spaces that aren't, where you live or work. So that specific examples people mentioned were things like coffee shops, co-working spaces, bars and wineries, and so on. 12 respondents expressed a desire for more local businesses in the community. There were a few comments against the idea of having more chain stores specifically, the exception that being hardware stores. That came up quite a bit as something people would like to see here. 8 respondents cited a need for more arts and cultural amenities, which based on where that ranks in the local identity question makes sense. And 28 respondents mentioned the lack of commercial activities and amenities east of Dunlap. And then rather than have samplings of what people said, I did a word cloud of all the comments that were tagged as being related to businesses and amenities. As you can see, restaurants, coffee, businesses, local, these are all big words and all like literally big words in the word cloud. All things that people mentioned as something they want to see more of. People also mentioned that they do not want more gas stations, gambling, or vape stores. So some of those words are in here as well. For residential development, we asked how respondents would rate certain elements of the village's housing and residential areas. Over 90% of respondents said that the quality of owner-occupied housing is a strength or great strength of the village. A little over 63% said that the amount of attainable housing is a strength or great strength. And then on the flip side, we have 40% of respondents saying that student housing is a weakness or great weakness, and 43% of respondents saying that the value and affordability of housing in the village is a weakness or great weakness. We also asked what kind of impact do you think different types of residential development would have on the community? There was clear consensus around single-family homes. Over 93% of respondents said that single-family homes would have a positive or very positive impact on the community. A little under 80% of respondents felt similarly about townhomes. A little over 68% feel similarly about condos and duplexes. On the other end of the spectrum, over 57% of respondents feel that large multi-unit dwellings, which we defined here as 13 or more units, would be negative or have a very negative impact. Everything in the middle in terms of anything from age-restricted communities, ADUs, triplexes and quadplexes, or smaller multi-unit dwellings, people were pretty evenly split on. So there's a clear support for more single-family homes, for townhomes, for condos and duplexes, as well as some support for other types of moderate density residential development. For written responses, 16 respondents mentioned the village's high cost of living. 7 respondents wrote against higher density housing, specifically due to school capacity, traffic, or safety. 5 responses were supportive of higher density housing, and 8 responses were supportive of moderate density and missing middle housing types. So again, you kind of see that split within the written responses as well. And this is what some of that feedback sounded like. One person saying the homes here are no longer affordable. Our starter home has become our forever home because we can't afford anything in this area. Somebody else saying medium density, lower cost housing would help fill housing needs and attract younger families. Somebody else saying that the propensity of housing toward homes with more bedrooms than residents leads to empty feeling neighborhoods. I'd like to see a trend to increase density. And then somebody else saying the village needs to encourage more single family houses to be built and less larger high density units that cause disruption and ruins the small town feel. For flexible connectivity, we asked similarly respondents to rate different features of the village's transportation network. Over 80% of respondents feel that access to highways and interstates is a strength or great strength. Over 68% feel similarly about the condition of roads and sidewalks. The more negative features, people said that, or over 47% of respondents said that walkability, transit options, and bike and pedestrian facilities are a weakness or great weakness. And then we also asked how comfortable people felt traveling by different modes of transportation in the village. Most respondents feel safe traveling by every mode of transportation listed, but worth noting that a little under 40% of respondents stated that they felt unsafe or very unsafe traveling by bike in the village. For written responses, transportation and connectivity was the most popular response theme of those written responses. 29 respondents noted that Dunlap is a barrier to connectivity. Fewer respondents, but still some respondents mentioned the railroad and Curtis Road as well. 22 respondents expressed a need for more connectivity between bike and pedestrian facilities. 14 respondents expressed support for expanding access to MTD in the community in some capacity. 4 respondents wrote against that idea specifically. And then that feedback looks a little bit like this. Somebody saying we need a biking master plan. The model of every HOA builds a disconnected, narrow bike trail that was put in as a marketing afterthought is a huge planning failure. We do have a bike and pedestrian plan, but I think that gets to that point that was brought up earlier about more proactive communication about village projects and initiatives that I'll get to later on in the presentation. Somebody else said it'd be nice to have more internet connectivity of the existing bike paths, and specifically mentioned Colbert Park to First Street. Crossing Dunlap and Curtis is tricky on bike or on foot. I would love to see more bike paths and a better solution around the train tracks, which again is in progress, but gets to the communication bit. And then crossing Dunlap is a major hurdle to anything but a car. It's even bad with a car. The safety and transportation safety also came up a lot in the written responses. 24 respondents said that vehicle speeding and inadequate bike and pedestrian infrastructure causes safety issues. 8 respondents requested better lighting specifically throughout the community to boost safety for cyclists and pedestrians. And again, just kind of a sampling of what that feedback entailed. Somebody saying that biking infrastructure is terrible, car traffic's very heavy, and bike commuting is dangerous. Too much speeding traffic on Curtis Road. Any biking / walking paths with adequate lighting would be great. Safety measures, night lighting to deter crimes. Somebody mentioning pedestrian safety on Church Street, especially near Carrie Busey and Colbert Park. Drivers ignore crosswalks, especially at Prospect and Curtis and Wesley and Curtis. It's dangerous to cross. And then lastly, somebody saying walking is good in some areas, but has room for improvement. Biking is just scary in this town. And then the last section we asked about was accessible recreation. We asked how often respondents engage with the village's parks and recreational facilities. Over 43% of respondents use those facilities on a daily or weekly basis. And then we also asked people to rate the different types of recreational facilities in the village. And overwhelmingly, over 90% of respondents listed parks and open spaces at a strength or great strength in the village. On the flip side of that, proximity and access to bike and pedestrian infrastructure got the greatest share of weakness or great weakness responses at a little over 40%. And then as to stakeholder feedback from the focus groups, we did ask the stakeholders different questions based on, you know, what their realm is, so to speak. But we did have common questions about what are our existing strengths and weaknesses as a community. For strengths, the stakeholders said things like the tax rate, the good reputation of the community, that it's family oriented, that it's safe, that's peaceful, and so on. For weaknesses, a lot of the people, the stakeholders asked, referenced the development process, which we are addressing through the UDO, as well as the lack of variety in businesses or vacant businesses, and cited the downtown as sort of a make or break opportunity for the village. So some takeaways from the community engagement. There's clearly some division over the ideal future trajectory of the village. That's to be expected. But I think there is a clear desire for more choices, whether that's in transportation, in housing, shopping, things to do, and the ability to access those choices. There's also consensus around major concerns related to better connectivity, more variation in local businesses, and the availability of public or semi-public gathering spaces, as well as housing affordability. And then, as I mentioned, the responses reflect a lack of awareness of ongoing village initiatives as well as Savoy's physical boundaries. And so that kind of made its way into some of our proposed goals and objectives. So with that said, we have a draft vision, sort of distilling all of that feedback that we got through the community engagement process. There's 4 pillars, I guess, of that vision. The first is broadening and enhancing the small town feel of Savoy. That would entail retaining and strengthening the village's small town appeal by encouraging development patterns that are characteristic of small towns and of Savoy when it was a smaller town. That means low to moderate density development, local businesses, gathering places, places where people can meet neighbors, essentially. It also means strengthening the village's sense of identity through placemaking efforts. The second pillar is intentional development and sustainable growth, and this gets to a point of tension that came out in some of the focus groups and verbal conversations we had during workshops and tabling events. People asked, you know, why would we expand? We need to make what we have better. So this would mean prioritizing the improvement of existing infrastructure and other public facilities while pursuing strategic opportunities for growth and new development. That means that infill development and annexation and development of land immediately adjacent to the village's boundaries would be emphasized over unplanned expansion or growth for the sake of growth. The third pillar is freedom of choice. This gets to what I spoke about in terms of the takeaways from the community engagement, removing barriers to expanded choices by offering a variety of housing types at a variety of price points, developing additional interconnected bike and pedestrian infrastructure, expanding access to public transit, encouraging a greater variety of land uses and offering incentives to small local businesses, and pursuing the development of recreational spaces that add to the diversity of activities that are available in the village. And then lastly, expanding access to amenities and recreation. This would entail expanding connectivity and the ability to access shops, activities, and other amenities through a variety of transportation options by continuing to pursue strategies to mitigate the impact of Dunlap and the railroad on transportation, and continuing to aim for all residents to live within a 10-minute walk of a park. That vision is supported by themes that are mostly the same as the previous comprehensive plan, with some changes: local identity, community prosperity, sustainable growth, flexible connectivity, and accessible recreation. And then as to the actual draft goals and objectives themselves, I realize this is hard to see on the screen, but it is included in your packet. I'm not sure how we want to handle this, if we want to go section by section and get comments or questions on what's being proposed. But before we do that, I do want to mention that the structure of each theme is the same. There's the theme name, a description of what that is, a description of objectives and strategies to accomplish those objectives. And then down at the bottom, performance measures, meaning how do we measure our progress toward that goal, and community partners. So those are groups that we could potentially work with to help achieve those goals. Yeah, any comments or questions on the local identity theme or on any of them?
Any questions so far, Larry?
Sure.
There you go. So it's a really pretty report, and I'm just wondering how long it took staff, how many hours? Normally you see staff, the number of hours to do the whole thing. I mean, including the surveys, and what would you say then?
It's including the survey. It's been the primary project for both me and the planning intern since August. So it's hard to put a number on it. For the report specifically, I'd say about 40 hours.
Okay. And so what do you see that's changed from the 2019?
I think,
Fundamentally, I mean.
yeah. The planning context is a little bit different because we are making a lot of progress toward the downtown and towards the underpass. Demographics are shifting. I think the difference in the goals is that they are more specific and more measurable, and they get to, I guess, more of the commonality. Like, despite the split in, you know, how people feel Savoy should develop, there is that common ground in terms of wanting more things to do, wanting more choices. And I think the goals and objectives that are being presented tonight get to that split.
So it's just a fine tuning of what we have in this.
It could be. You could view it that way.
Okay.
I think also it may be important to note since 2018, you know, we see the theme of housing and affordability. The difference in housing affordability in the village of Savoy since 2019 has changed extensively. And that because we're such a suburban type bedroom community impacts everything else. So that is, should be highlighted, I think, and was in many of the comments, but it changes everything else pretty extensively. So in addition to what Caitlin
So
said.
that's another thing. And so my you know, I see it in the 19, we did have a call for the local identity.
Right.
And we are doing the downtown. I'm just wondering, what some of, if we fulfilled some of these goals.
Right.
And I'm not sure about that. Then I have a question of how many respondents? You said 262. Is that, what's the total number of respondents?
302 responses,
That's-
262 are from the village or
262.
indicated that they live in the.
So this data set is pretty much from 262 people who live here.
Right.
Okay. And I'm looking at this and I see one of the goals, a conclusion was expanding MTD service and frequency. So I'm just wondering, would that, if we did that, would that increase our property tax?
Potentially.
It would
Okay.
be significant, yeah.
Okay. And also one of the comments for the MTD, to get MTD was, it not having MTD here has hurt your businesses. So that indicates to me that this is someone that doesn't have a skin in the game in terms of property tax. So, you know, that's one of the things that I question. The other thing is, let me see. we did have a number of years ago, the board has had a visioning session. And I don't think we've had one since then. But I see in your report, a key point was that staff developed a vision. And so that kind of struck me because somehow I thought the board would kind of have a vision for how we go about this. Just a few comments.
I would note, and I don't want to speak for Caitlin again, but maybe that visioning is more tied to the comprehensive plan. To your point about the visioning for the village as a whole, I've actually discussed with the president and just actually received our last quote to complete a strategic plan, which would include visioning this fall. So we will be, as an organization, sitting down and doing that. And I think it's possible that those visions, if you will, can live together, so to speak, with ours being global and this being comp plan. So there will be an opportunity, I guess, to show that.
I guess my concern is having put in a year on this prior to our visioning. I just question that, and I'd hate to keep going with it.
The intention of tonight's session was to distill it says staff developed a vision. Staff developed a vision based on community feedback received.
Right.
So this is
about 3% on about 262 people.
Sure, yeah. That is the response rate. But the intention of tonight's session was to present the distillation of that feedback and get the board's input on that vision and whether or not, again, we are pursuing the right path.
Okay, well, my opinion on that in terms of the board is that I don't see enough metrics to really make some of these conclusions. Especially just the first thing that struck me was the MTD by some, and a comment used in the presentation by someone who I don't believe was a stakeholder.
I agree with a lot of what he mentioned, Larry. It seems a little backwards that in essence, it sounds like staff has worked on policy and then we get behind it, as opposed to we have talked about, MTD is a big policy decision and I've been around long enough to be involved in that. So I guess what I don't want is for this, for us to just go along with what is there, to go along, get along. And I don't think we're the leaders if we do that. There's just a lack of leadership in this. And I appreciate all the work you've done, obviously. And I will say one thing, the slides are, I can't read them.
Fair,
I
yeah.
can't read any of them. And I have them in front of me. Well, those I can read if I pull them up, but when we do have a presentation, we really need to do something about, like, for instance, if you were in the back and you could read it, or somebody my age could read it, that's just a helpful hint, for sure. We last did this in 2019, was it?
Correct.
And didn't you say it should be updated every 10 years?
That's about the average.
And yet it's
Every 5 to 10 years it should be
Okay.
looked at. So that's what staff is doing, is looking at it.
I guess
For
what I
5 years.
don't, what I appreciate is distilling and gathering the information. And in fact, then trying to continue to seek information. Like, for instance, we have a bunch of information not from 200 and some people. And hey, then we could put it out. Hey, this is what we have. Do you still want to weigh in on it? Because feedback is super important, but I just think I'm just concerned that we have it a little bit backwards. It's not her fault. It's our fault, I suppose, when we're not taking the lead as much as I think we should. And so like a red line, like, okay, the original one, how is it different? How is it changed? How is it added? And those kinds of things. Maybe as a board, we decide that we don't want any more high density but other people do. So that's where leadership comes in, where you don't necessarily take the consensus of X number of people who decide to weigh in. I value their opinion because my goodness, they spent the time to weigh in. But we also leaders.
I just want to point out to both Larry and Joan that, as Caitlin said, this is based on the feedback that we got from the public. And now it's our turn to take a look at, based on what they are saying, what we want to do as a board. So I hear MTD is a no for both of you. I don't think having that
Oh,
as having that as one of our goals, you know, exactly like that, which is the point of this whole conversation, is not staff trying to tell, now it's our turn to provide input while we create this updated product. So I just want you guys to keep that in mind. So
I guess I want to see the differences.
Dennis, did you have your hand up?
I was gonna say, I think one thing that I seem to have heard frequently in that was that those responses that they favored single-family homes and townhouses and moderate density as opposed to high density.
Correct.
Something we'll have to think about here in a little bit. Also, the responses on the MTD from the public was that if I remember correctly, that the opportunity to have, I'm assuming, more bus service.
Yeah, so we got 14 responses from people saying that they would like expanded MTD access in some capacity. Some of those responses said not through neighborhoods. Some of those responses said more bus shelters. But I think the general idea from those responses was that people want more options with transportation, including bus access.
And yet, how do I want to put this? Buses tear up roads.
Sure.
And because of the weight, as do garbage trucks and things along those heavy driving. And yet part of the responses dealt with sidewalks and streets, roads. It's kind of a catch-22. If we have more bus service, then we also have more repairs to our roads. And I was told by someone from MTD that they're not in the business of repairing roads. So, and that came from high up. I guess that's all I had, I think, right now.
And I have to say, it's not that I'm opposed to MTD. I look at having two community open houses and having 6 people come in. I don't know if 3 of those people might have had an agenda. I don't know, but I'm just looking. So yeah, I'm just kind of, that's what brings me to question some of the stuff.
If I'm not mistaken, we actually sent mailers to every residence in the village, and
Yeah.
that's the challenge, right? I mean, and
It is.
actually 300 respondents, even though some of them aren't residents, there are constituents because they're likely tied to the village some way, shape, or form, is unfortunately a really solid response. Outside of paying people maybe to respond, that might be the only way we can improve it. But I do see your point. 300 is a small ratio.
It's not necessarily the response that our constituents want necessarily. I mean, it's a sampling.
Right. We wish they would respond.
they'll just complain later on when we do something and say they never had an input. But any other questions, Bill?
Overall, Caitlin, I think this is a solid start to, updating the comp plan. And I'm noticing some of the, the themes that are there and continuing on, nearly all of them are continuing themes.
Correct.
The ones that are changing are changing, I think, in a reasonable way. I think we had one term, resilient infrastructure, that's moved to the sustainable growth. Still has infrastructure. I mean, it seems like the sub items are still there. Terming things different, and I like that. Most of what I read in the plan itself, or at least the proposed plan that we'll get to beat up on and go further. I don't think it's into recommendations that, like, there is no MTD recommendation in there. The MTD part is all in the community responses, which again are responses, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a specific action, and there isn't a proposed action, at least unless I missed it. But one of the things I really liked about the comp plan, and maybe we're going to get to this once we get pieces nailed down. The comp plan that we had in 19 not only had the objectives, it had detailed performance measures and strategies, and whether this is short term or long term, and how low, medium, high priority. I'm hopeful we'll get to that point, because I
Yeah.
do think that is important, as well as responsible party, I think, was the other bit that was in there. But I do think we've got some good measurable criteria. That is good, because things you can't measure don't ever happen. So I do like the way some of these have been reworded or crafted to be more measurable. But I look forward to the remainder of the process as we continue to beat it up and get it to what it needs to be. The engineer in me looks at the map and says their map needs more detail, but there's time to put more detail in the map.
Measurable, that is one of the keys, is what have we measured before this, in 2019 and 2023. What have we been successful at, and what haven't we been successful at? I'm not sure we have gotten to that. We've had that discussion.
We did actually. The existing conditions report that I presented back in August had a whole list of the comp plan goals and objectives from 2019 that we have been successful with accomplishing or are making progress towards. And I think included in the appendix of that report was our status with the other ones that we didn't meet.
Oh, thank you. Tell me again what month that was.
August of last year.
Okay. I will look back. Thank you.
Caitlin, do you want to continue?
Sure. I mean, I think I'm sort of done with the presentation element. As we go on, there's the different themes, different goals and objectives. I guess I'm curious if there's more feedback, or we could provide a period of a couple weeks to do that.
I may have missed it, but after each of the strategies within the objectives, there's often letters.
I forgot to explain that. Yeah.
I've been searching for a key, or what did these things mean? Oh, yeah, you can see it on the screen there. I'm like, what is an S, or what is an L? Or
S is short term, M is medium term, L is long term, O is ongoing. So goals that are ongoing aren't necessarily going to be completed by the time this comes to be updated, but they are things to continually be striving for.
Okay. I've been searching for that, and yeah, I was missing.
And we'll get that in the report when we're ready for a final.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you, how long would the board like to be able to provide input on this? I guess through emails to Caitlin. And we could always come back and have another discussion later on at a board meeting, but initially I'm thinking if we got input to Caitlin through emails, might be a good way to start and fine tune it even further. But what's everybody thinking? A month, 2 months?
It's a month.
month? Everybody okay with initially with the month? Okay, so that I think is what we'll do is give the board members opportunity to submit any comments or suggestions to Caitlin for the next month, and then we'll look at bringing this back up after those changes are made.
I'd ask Caitlin to send us a reminder 2 weeks from now and then another reminder 3 weeks from now that we all agreed to give you comments within a month.
I'll set up an automatic thing because
Sounds
I'm
good.
not going to remember to remind you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I did want to acknowledge that I forgot to president's comments. Attorney, can I go back to that, or is it? You're running the meeting. I did forget, it is National Clerks Week, so we want to thank our clerk. We also have a former clerk in the audience today. Yeah. They always do a lot of work for us, and they keep us in line with the making sure we follow the Opens Meeting Act. They're always a great resource. So thank you, Wendy. I also wanted to compliment our staff, Public Works and Fire Department, on all the work they did with the marathon. And it looked like another successful event. You guys did a great job again. So, but those are the two things that I wanted to mention. So we'll move on to our study session items. If there's no objection from the board, I'd like to go out of order just with one item. I'd like to bring up study session item 2026-25 resolution authorizing repairs to the ladder 461 at Pierce Midwest Refurbishing Center and Red Line Fire and Safety. If that way we could get our firefighters out of here. It's other just some of these other items initially might take a while, so if nobody has an objection, we'll do that. All right, Sam.
Thank you, President, Board of Trustees. As you saw in the report, Pierce McQueen has done a inspection report while it is at the shop being repaired from damages sustained at the tire repair shop. Those inspection items are provided to you, and we're seeking direction tonight and guidance on getting those repairs done locally to save some costs, as well as some items done at Pierce McQueen while it's there, as we're looking to save our budget to get through the whole budget year. We know it's early in the budget process, and it's a big ask, but we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions from Sam? Are we clear on what Sam's asking? Everybody clear on what he's asking? Okay. Sam, I don't think anybody has any questions, so.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with this agenda item being placed as a part of a consent agenda then? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen. Okay.
Hey,
Yes.
hey, Sam. They're gonna certify it's good for 10 more years, right? If we do the repairs.
That's the hope. It won't be brand new. There were some items like paint that we deferred knowing it's a 19-year-old truck, but it'll pass all the ladder and aerial certifications that it needs to have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll move on to study session item 2621, a resolution rezoning 201 and 205 West Church from R2 moderate density, single family residential district to R5 high density multifamily residential. And I guess we'll turn this over to Caitlin.
Yeah. Sorry, you caught me mid cough drop. So this, as many of you know, the applicant is looking to rezone the subject properties from R2 to R5 in order to construct cottage courts. The properties are currently in use as single-family residences. Prior actions worth noting, the Board of Trustees established a TIF district and a downtown redevelopment project area in 2023 that encompass one of the subject properties we're talking about. Also worth noting that one of the co-applicants for this rezoning is the CEO of Downtown Development Group. To add some context for, you know, what the zoning and land uses are in this area. Like I mentioned, the subject properties are currently single unit housing. To the north, there's single unit residential and a daycare center. To the south, single unit residential and machinery and equipment sales. To the east, machinery and equipment sales and single unit residential, and then to the west, more single unit residential. For surrounding zoning, again, the subject properties are R2. To the north, we have C1. To the south, we have R2 and C1, depending on which south you're looking at. To the east, we have R2 and C1, and then to the west, we have R2. Prior village actions, these just get to, again, the establishment of the TIF district and the downtown redevelopment project area, as well as the selection of downtown development group as the designated developer of downtown Savoy. This is TIF 3 or the downtown redevelopment project area. I've included a star along the shared property line between the two subject properties that are being considered tonight. Again, one of the subject properties is in that project area. And then, as I mentioned, the applicant is looking to rezone these properties in order to replat them into a single property and construct cottage courts. Many people are unfamiliar with what cottage courts are. Essentially, it's a bunch of single unit homes oriented around a common courtyard. I've included pictures from a cottage court development in Decatur, Georgia, as well as one in Champaign. There's at least two in Champaign that I'm aware of. And then the third picture is the UDO's rendering of what a cottage court might look like. And again, these are all single unit homes oriented around a common court. For relevant sections of the code, R2, the purpose of the R2 district is listed in the UDO as being intended for single-family detached dwellings on moderately sized lots. R5 is intended to provide land for the development of multifamily dwellings at densities ranging between medium and high. For minimum lot standards in the R5 district for cottage courts, these two lots individually do meet the standards for lot area or minimum lot area. Individually, they don't meet the standards for minimum lot width, but again, if they're replatted into a single property as the applicant intends to do, they will meet that 150 foot minimum width requirement. For conformance with the comprehensive plan, the future land use map identifies the subject properties as mixed density residential. That is the highest density residential classification that we have in the comprehensive plan. The requested zoning map amendments are supported by that classification and would enable the construction of moderate density housing. It also, or what is being proposed with the rezoning helps to further local identity goal 2 in the 2019 comp plan, which is to promote the availability of housing options to meet the diverse needs and preferences of Savoy residents. A little under 50% of housing units here in the village are single-family detached homes. 21% are multifamily structures containing 10 units or more. And there are no cottage court style developments in the village. So if constructed, this would help contribute to the variety of housing options available in the village and provide moderate density residential uses that are within walking distance of the downtown development. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the proposed rezoning against criteria taken from the LaSalle standards. Essentially, these are state standards that are used as a balancing test to determine whether or not a requested zoning map amendment is appropriate in a given location. These are used as a balancing test rather than, you know, you have to check every single one off. The question is essentially, does the proposed rezoning satisfy the criteria on the whole? And the Planning and Zoning Commission found that it did. They held a public hearing and review of the proposed rezoning on April 20th. The applicant provided testimony at the public hearing. 7 residents spoke against the proposal. And then, as we know, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the zoning map amendments and didn't include any special conditions or stipulations. That's what I've got for the staff report.
I also, before we get too far into this, I did hand out, I received a email from Bob McClary today, so I had the clerk make copies of that letter. Do we have any other? Oh, yeah, so we have a number of letters and emails, it looks like, from area residents on this. What's that? Yeah, Erica Manuel also sent in. Kara Mathis, Carrie Cookus, and Diane Ditzler also sent in comments to us. So I just want to make sure the board is aware of that, and if anybody would like to see that materials, we'll make copies for the board. So, okay, you already received copies, I'm sorry. Any comment? Yes, and trustees have any questions for Kayla?
One option that's not given to us on here is the R4. Could you tell us again what the difference is between R4 and R5?
Yeah, R4 permits residential development between single family up to some limited number of multifamily. I keep getting the number of units mixed up based on all the different unit numbers. I think it's either 8 or 12. Whereas R5 does not permit single family and permits 12 or more units of multifamily development. There is no difference in the standards for cottage court development between R4 and R5.
And is there a reason from the applicant why they wanted the R5?
The applicant expressed that R5 presented limitations in terms of lot sizes that in communicating with them directly further, it may have been a misunderstanding of the requirements between the two districts.
So if we as a board were to approve this next week to a R5, then we are positioning ourselves for any future development in that area being R5 allowable and nothing that the board can
It's a
stipulate.
it's a possibility. I would just point out that due to the size of the properties, there would be limiting factors like parking, setbacks, etc. So it's not like the entire size of the parcels could be used for multifamily.
Joan?
Well, just quickly, I think R5 is a bridge too far. R4 I can possibly live with. I don't want it to go past, I want it to go back to planning. I do want to ask about the sewer issue. I know Walt, who's an expert in those things, albeit a while back, right? Yeah. So that is a concerning issue if in fact that is something that we need to be careful about. I think we, since, you know, I don't know what year, but that isn't probably a problem, but I would love to have more of the experts or weigh in on the sewer issue, the water runoff issue.
Yeah, I'll take that one, just as the engineer in the room who asked the other engineer that works for the village what the real status is. And then I got maps and details and pipe sizes and all the things that most people don't care about. However, I was also concerned about that, and information I got from Roland has verified that the issues that were a problem many years ago have been resolved. There's a new lift station, there's new sewer interceptor mains in the area. The sanitary sewer problems are no longer, right? Though they were dealt with about 15 years ago is what and the village does not have any complaints or issues that have been made aware at all in the village in this area in the last 5 years. So there's a number of new sewer interceptors that have been put in with the new lift station out by the rec center, new meaning 15 years ago. But in sewer language, that's pretty new, quite frankly. So I was also concerned about that. I looked at the subject area is near the end of a line, right? So if you're going to get backups that far up, that means that there's pretty much, well, Joan, you'd know, because your house would have backups in it before this property would have backups, given the way that sewers are flowing right now. So luckily that issue's been resolved.
Okay, anybody else have questions? You good? Or-
Yeah, I also I watched the 2-hour and 45-minute planning commission meeting. Thank you for everyone who sat through that. And I'll also agree that we need to make sure that folks are turning their mics on during those as well, because there were many minutes of dead air that I couldn't hear what was going on. And I asked a lot of questions of staff. I asked questions of the developer to try and prepare for this. I even put posts out on Facebook to say, hey, folks, if you got a question or you got an input, and I got varied input back. The thing that I was coming into this meeting thinking I'm going to advocate for what I've already heard Joan and Dee say, which is I'd rather see this be R4 than R5. It doesn't affect the cottages, and what the developer is trying to do is just as perfectly affected in an R4 as it is an R5. It precludes something larger from going in the future. Caitlin made a comment though a little while ago, given the size of the property, you can't put in a 12. The only thing that you can do in R5 that you can't do in R4 is a 12 or more apartment building. In order to do a 12 or more apartment building and meet the parking requirements that we have, you can't fit it on those 2 lots. Now, if you were to get one more adjacent one and bring it into R5, then you could do a 12 or a 15 unit apartment building, or, and the way that the comp plan is written, that is to be transitional, right? We're going from commercial to residential. And that means that current properties that are zoned R2 in the current, as they sit today, eventually will move to be R3, 4, 5 as our intention. That's the comp plan from 2019 says that. I don't imagine that'll change in the updates we're doing. And it may have existed in the comp plan from, 10 years prior to that. So my gut coming in was that I'd rather see this be R4. In fact, I did ask a question to say, can we just change the resolution to modify that? And the answer from our attorney is no, we can't do that, because the petitioner came with a specific petition. And that is what there was a public meeting and public comment. So we would have to reject it and ask them to resubmit it as R4 rather than R5, which then you worry about delaying. But as I recall hearing from the public meeting, there's current leases that are going to go through the year or longer, and it's not like development's going to start tomorrow. So we actually have a little bit of time if we wanted to do that. So I'm a bit torn, because I'd rather see this as R4. However, the reasons I'd rather see it as R4 than R5 are overcome by the limitations of what you can't build an R5 type development given the size of the lot. So it's kind of a moot point. However, if you later combined it with other adjacent properties, you then could. And the great thing that we did was pass the UDO, which means there don't have to be a bunch of mother may I's to planning and to us to go build something. We did that to encourage development. I want to encourage development, but I'd like to encourage the right development, and I'm still torn.
So I guess what I think you're saying is, well, first of all, so you're saying R4, might limit it up to 8, possibly 12.
It's 12.
It is 12 for sure. Okay. But we have a request for 8 here. And I would rather see it this way. And if there was a request for R5 later, or R4 to be expanded, we could do that. I'd rather see it go back as R4 too.
The other go. Thought I forgot. That's why we're having a week for you, because you do such a great job. All right. I'm going to just, we're going to go ahead and put this as an agenda item or action item instead of part of the consent agenda next week. So I suspect the board, and Heather, when I talked to her today, she would like this as part of the as an action item instead of part of the consent agenda. So I'm guessing that there's going to be a lot of discussion next week, even on this. So we'll put it as that. Okay. So with no other questions, we'll move on to study session item 2026-22, a resolution rezoning 206 Wesley Avenue from R2 moderate density single family residential district to DT downtown district. And we'll turn this over to Caitlin again.
Yeah, so the applicant is seeking to rezone this property from R2 to DT. The same as with the previous case, this property is part of the downtown redevelopment project area as well as TIF 3. And the applicant in this case is the CEO of the Downtown Development Group. For surrounding land uses and zoning, again, the subject property is currently zoned R2. To the north, we have R2. To the south, we have DT or Downtown District. Those properties were rezoned last March, I believe. To the east, DT, and then to the west, R2 and R3. In terms of adjacent uses, pretty much all of the surrounding properties to the north, south, east, and west in terms of immediately adjacent properties are used for single unit housing. The prior village actions in this case are the same as the previous, essentially just the board establishing TIF 3 and the downtown redevelopment project area, as well as selecting Downtown Development Group as the designated developer for downtown Savoy. And again, I've included a map of TIF 3 with a star over the subject property. As I mentioned, it is part of that downtown redevelopment project area. For relevant sections of the code, this property meets the minimum lot area and lot width standards for both its current zoning district as well as the downtown district. For conformance with the comprehensive plan, this property is classified as part of the mixed-use town center in the comprehensive plan, or the downtown, as we call it. If the rezoning were approved, it would also help to further local identity goal 1, objective A, which is to develop a town center to act as a gathering space and serve a variety of community purposes, including commercial, entertainment, and recreational functions. As with the last case, the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this rezoning against the LaSalle standards. This happened April 20th. The applicant provided testimony at the public hearing. 5 residents spoke against it, and the Planning and Zoning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval without any special conditions or stipulations. Happy to take any questions at this point.
Okay, any questions about rezoning this? Okay. Is the board okay with including this as part of a consent agenda? Okay. And talking to Heather on the phone, she was okay with that as well. So I will include this item as part of a consent agenda. We'll move on to study session item 2026-23, a resolution approving rezoning of a property with PIN 03-20-25-300-044 from R1 low density single family residential district to P1 public use and institutional and PIN number 03-20-25-300-045 to R1 single family residential district. It's quite a lot.
Yeah.
Is this one to you?
Yeah, last one, I promise.
Okay.
These properties are likely familiar to you. These are the properties that were included in the right-of-way vacation and exchange between the village and First Baptist Church on Prospect. In updating the zoning map for this year, we realized that the adopting ordinance for that didn't address the zoning of either parcel. So this is just a rezoning to bring the zonings of those parcels into conformance with the properties that they're acting as part of. So this is what the current zoning. The southwest parcel that is now part of the church property, it's shown on the county GIS consortium's map as being R1. Technically, it's unclassified. The church property itself is zoned R1. And then the easternmost property, which is now part of Burwash Park, is currently zoned R1. We are looking to rezone it to P1 to bring it into conformance with the park.
Hold on. I may save you some time because I think this is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Does anybody want Caitlin to?
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And is everybody okay with this being the consent agenda? Okay. It'll be added to the consent agenda next week. Thank you. You're fascinating though. but-
No, appreciate it. It saves me the slides.
Okay, the last item, a study session item is 2026-24, a resolution approving the Board of Trustees attendance to the 2026 Illinois Municipal League Conference, annual conference. Any discussion on this item? This is our standard one with our code requires us to get approval beforehand for this. So any discussion? Anybody having an issue with adding this to the consent agenda? All right, so we'll do that. We'll add that to the consent agenda. That ends our study session items. We're up to new business. Anybody have any new business for tonight? Looking 3 times, no new business. Any Board of Trustees remarks? Larry?
I'm just would like to speak a little bit to the process of getting a study session. We went through the budget February, I believe, and I had talked about and I had talked about getting a study session for today, and a number of you, in fact, I think most of the board signed on our process to get a study session, and for and this speaks to the sense of place that we talked about earlier, to get an event fund so that we can look at farmers market, neighborhood block parties, and other unifying events like a concert or parade or whatever. And I think that would do a lot to help unify, again, to make a sense of place in this and here. I was a little frustrated because today was supposed to be the day that we talked about it, and it's not on the study session. So I'd love to see that very soon.
If I may, Mr. President, I took the liberty because of the extensive discussion and topics at hand to move that to next month. The money's allocated. I just thought it might be a better use of our time to separate very long and extensive topics into 2 meetings. So
Well,
I should have
appreciate that.
communicated that. That's my fault, but I
wasn't
wanted
aware.
to, I just wanted to spread out the work a little bit. So Sam has presented everything to me. We're tweaking a few things, but that will be on the June 1st meeting.
Fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. So
Great.
now everybody
you.
can be excited
you.
about
We're
it.
all-
Yeah, no, pleasure.
Any other trustee comments? Okay, seeing none. That ends our agenda item, so I'll declare us adjourned.